on tap as well. Brilliant. No, well, okay, let's make a start. So, hi everybody, welcome to the Welsh Azure user group on the 12th of November. We hopefully have got really good packed sessions for you tonight, some really good interesting things to talk about. But before we kick off with the actual sessions, we'll just quickly run through a few bits and pieces for you, just a little bit of information and some housekeeping rules. So first, ask please everybody, can we be courteous to each other? Should go without saying, I'm sure. No questions, a silly question. We should have the chat open. We've got some great minds on the chat, so feel free, any questions as you go, filter them through the chat. Please stay on mute unless you're invited to speak from one of the presenters. But if you've got anything to say, pop it in the chat. If one of us can't answer, we can fire those back to the presenters at the end of their sessions. Like I say, no questions are silly questions, so ask away. You know, you've got a lot of good minds on here tonight, so if we can't answer your questions, we can surely take it away and follow up after the event. And finally, if you haven't already, install the Kahoot app. Go onto your phone, it's in the Apple, all good mobile stores. Look for Kahoot, because at the end of this, we will be having a little Kahoot quiz with actual prizes, which is obviously good. Just a little bit about the group, just to keep you guys kind of aware of what's going on with the Welsh Azure user group. So we are one of many user groups spread across the UK and globally. We're supported by Microsoft, so we've got Anna, Matt and Ahmed who are on the call with us tonight. They support us heavily. But from a perspective of organisation and running around, getting speakers, organising prizes, we've got myself, I work at BT Enterprise. We've got Richard Griffiths, works for Confused.com. We got a Bull who works for Clearbank, and George who works at the IPO. So, like I say, we're all kind of community focused. If there's any questions, if you've got any advice, remarks, anything at all, send it our way. You can obviously follow us on the Twitter handle at Welsh Azure, and LinkedIn groups don't give you a nice URL, so I try my best with that Cutley URL maker. So yeah, give us a follow, join in. Feel free to ask any questions or any bits of advice or information you want to send our way. We're all for that. So just a couple of quick links, only trying to be a little bit apt towards this evening's events. First one I wanted to share was the Global Azure User Group. So that link, that's been a website made up by one of Microsoft Cloud senior cloud advocates in the very community focused, Sarah Lean. So if you browse that website, obviously we're in a virtual environment at the moment, so it's great. And I'm just looking at the attendee list. I can see quite a lot of guys that attend some of the other user groups across the country. But you know, feel free to have a look down that list. If there's not a user group close to you, then join one up the country. There's so much good content going on at the moment. Use that resource and say hello, jump in. Like I say, the one thing that keeps me going is the prizes. I try and jump in and see if I can win the quiz every time. It's always a bonus. But you're learning some great stuff at the same time, and you're being active in the community. So the other one, not so much of a great URL, apologies for that, but it's quite apt towards the WVD talk that Admiral are going to give us in a second. But really that's around, if you're looking at your certifications, they're actually creating one at the moment for WVD. So there's potentially going to be a WVD administrator. That link will take you to a little bit of a feedback form. So you can actually put some advice through to the product teams and the community teams, and feed that directly back to the Microsoft Learn team, where they can piece together these certifications. So I think they're actually after some feedback. So if you've got any WVD experience currently, have a little look at that link, because I think all feedback is welcomed. So like I say, we'll quickly kick on to a message from our sponsors. I don't know if Des is on. I haven't seen him join. I don't think he's on, is he? You haven't seen him join, Anna, no? And he's not saying anything, so no, I presume he's not on. So yeah, quickly just want to give a big shout out to our sponsors. For those of you who've been following the group, you'll have noticed that we've got two sponsors now. So the first one being Servant. Huge thanks to those guys. As you can see on that slide, there's some, as I mentioned, there's some fantastic user groups across the country. These are just three. So there's ourselves, there's the Glasgow user group and the Northern user group. Servant obviously support and help us with things like prizes and really keeping the back office ticking over. So look those guys up. Huge thanks from us to Servant, and also the same really goes to Admiral. It was great to find out that Admiral were keen to sponsor the user group and put back into the community. So I don't think they need any real introduction. Huge thanks from us at the Welsh Azure user group to Admiral for obviously helping us support that and put as much as we can back to the community. On that note, Anna, a little word from Anna McNally around open hacks. Are you there?
Amazing, thanks John, great opening, love that. Yeah, hi everyone. I think there's quite a few of you I recognise that are on the call today, and for those of you that don't know me, I'm Anna McNally. I'm one of the cloud solution architects here at Microsoft. Welsh, as you can probably tell. I've been working with Microsoft two years this month actually, and work quite closely with a number of our financial services and insurance customers. And I wanted to spend just 2 or 3 minutes talking about open hacks. So I've been personally on 3 open hacks as a Microsoft employee, and I've started working with customers on open hacks. So if you haven't heard of an open hack, essentially it's a hands-on learning challenge-based hackathon. So it's over the course of 3 days, and you work in small teams to complete a series of technical challenges. And these challenges are really created based on real life problems that we're trying to resolve through our technology. So if you are working with a Microsoft partner, or if you are working for an organization that has dedicated Microsoft employees working with you, please reach out to the right contacts that you have, because open hacks have been such a fantastic learning opportunity for the customers that I'm working with. And there's a variety of technologies that we cover. So we cover containers, we cover SQL migration, DC migration, we run hacks on DevOps and more data areas and AI as well. So they're designed by our commercial software team. And like I said, they replicate real life scenarios. So they're absolutely amazing hands-on experience, a lot different to sort of, learning on your own and going through course material. They are awesome. And like I said, the feedback that we've had has been phenomenal so far. And I've been doing these for the last year with customers. And like I said, we as Microsoft employees go on these as well. So to give you an idea of the agenda over the 3 days, we tend to hack for about 2-3 hours in the morning and 2-3 hours in the afternoon in your teams. And we normally tend to get on some external speakers to support your business challenges or your workloads. So they're really, really good fun, and a massive amount of learning that happens over the course of those. So make connections to your Microsoft teams that you're involved in, or make connections with the partners that you're using in your organizations. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, and if I can connect you to the right people at Microsoft, I will. But yeah, I can't sort of over exaggerate how amazing I've seen and witnessed open hacks been with my customers throughout the last year. So yeah, definitely check them out. I think I popped the URL in one of the slides, and I can share it in the chat channel as well. So yeah, thanks, John. That's great.
I was going back to that because there's clearly a timer in that slide that just wants to tell us about the next event. Thanks, Anna. No, that's brilliant. And just, I've been on a couple of these open hacks, and they are phenomenal. They're really good learning opportunities. In fact, I just finished one today. So yeah, highly recommend them if you can get on them, or reach out to your account manager or partner manager. Give those guys a shout. So thanks, Anna. Brilliant.
Thanks, John.
Okay, takes us on to bit of news about the next hack. I know it's early, we haven't kicked off with this one yet. The next event, we haven't kicked off with this one yet, but we're really really excited. Can't wait for this one personally. I think this is going to be a great couple of hours. We've managed to secure Abel Wang and April Edwards from Microsoft fame. We're calling it a very merry DevOps. I think we had a chat earlier within the team, didn't we, about whether we make it fancy dress, cameras on, mulled wine, mince pies, Christmas hats, all that malarkey. So I can't stress it enough, but I think that's, this show tonight's going to be awesome, but I think that one's going to be as equally awesome. So save the date, stick that in your diary, sign up on RSVP. Yeah, be glad to see you at that one as well. Okay, onwards with tonight then. So we've got, like I say, we've got a great lineup tonight. First call, we've got Paul and Richard on from Admiral Group. They're going to take us through a little bit of a story around, obviously, in the current climate and in COVID, and what Admiral actually did with Windows Virtual Desktop and the part that played with their business continuity planning. So really excited to see what Paul and Richard have got in store for us on that one. We got about 45 minutes talk, so I don't know, if we finish a little bit early, if there would be a few questions. Like I say, any questions, fire them through the chat, and if it's something directed at Paul and Richard, we can get them answered at the end or during. After that, then we've got Dave and Matt from Microsoft going to give us, I think, some demos and some great information on Azure Logic App, so integration as a service and beyond. So looking forward to that one as well. Likewise, any questions as we go, fire them through the chat window, and then roundabout, so there'll be about 2 45-minute talks. We'll fire some questions. We're going to try and avoid a break this time. I don't know, we'll see how we get on, but I think we'll avoid a little bit of a break. We'll hopefully fire straight into the Kahoot quiz, and there are not one but 2 £50 Amazon vouchers up for grabs. So I mean, you can't really sniff at that, can you? So it's unfortunate that we can't enter these either, is it? Can we? No, we can't do it. So yeah, 2 £50 Amazon vouchers. I think what we'll do, we'll have a discussion later whether or not we give first and second prize, or what we might even do is give a first prize for the quiz. And if you can stick around and give us some feedback, because honestly, guys, this is a community event. It's for the community. If there's any questions, information, we want your feedback. So if you can stick around to the end, I'll give you a QR code you can scan and give us some of your feedback. I think what we'll probably end up doing, like we did last time, is pick one person at random and pick a £50 voucher out of there. So we might do that. We'll decide, I suppose. So on that note, I think we're pretty good for time. I think I will hand you over to Paul and Richard now from Admiral Group. Guys, over to you.
Thanks, John. Let me just share my slides here. Hopefully that's coming out right. There you go. Excellent. Okay. My name's Paul Connah. I'm Cloud Platform Manager at Admiral. We're a small insurance shop based in Cardiff. I'm here tonight with colleague Richard Lawson. He's an infrastructure architect. Tonight we're going to talk you through a little bit about Admiral's response to COVID, how Azure helped with that. In particular, our use of Windows Virtual Desktop, what went well, what was more challenging, and how we've developed it since putting it into action. Richard's also going to give a little bit of a demo, and also, if we've got time, maybe something around some additional platform management that we've put in place. But before I start, I wanted to give just a very brief background into Admiral's cloud history. I've been at Admiral for so long, I'm embarrassed to say now. I've been in various infrastructure roles, and in that time we've always operated our own data centers. A few years ago, Admiral started an agile transformation program, and we felt that we needed a more flexible approach to building infrastructure that could support our more modern applications. We recognised that cloud could play a major part in that transformation. Switching to cloud required a significant shift, not only in the technology, but also the culture, hearts and minds. Loads of people needed convincing, really, that we could do cloud, safely and securely. So we started a cloud program to help manage all of those aspects. I moved from my role in architecture and started a small engineering team who were working on the technical enablement. So over time, my team's built out a catalogue of infrastructure codes. We work closely with developers to build new applications in Azure and migrate existing applications from on-prem or hosted providers. And we've also started a number of sort of larger programs since COVID actually kicked in, and they're going to be based in Azure as well. So that's where we were. Everything was fine. In February, one of my team went on holiday to China, and when he came back, had to spend a couple of weeks working from home because of some virus they had out there. The whole team thought it was hilarious, but then, you know, fast forward really just a couple of weeks, and the situation changed quite significantly. Yeah, I mean, obviously everyone remembers this, but, you know, I think just to demonstrate the speed in which things happened, really. So, you know, 16th of March, Matt Hancock told House of Commons that everyone should socially distance, and then just a week later, you know, full lockdown kicked in. In the lead up to that event, seeing what's happening in Italy and Spain, Admiral had been planning for a situation where, you know, possibly staff might not be able to come into the office. I'm sure loads of you work in similar environments, but you know, in Admiral's offices, it's hard to stay away from anyone. So, you know, we were planning on having our entire workforce working from home for an unknown, possibly extended, as it turns out, extended period of time. So here's the situation prior to March 23rd. We had only around 200 agents working from home. I think that's probably on the generous side, actually. They were mainly working in new business, and we had around 300 VPN users, mainly IT, back office staff. I mean, pretty much the whole organisation was office-based. So we had 5,000 agents in South Wales, or employees in South Wales, lots of agents. And then another couple of thousand working in Canada and India. So they're Admiral employees, but they work in remote offices, and that helps us to sort of support, you know, Admiral's opening hours. Nearly everyone in the UK had a PC on their desk or a thin client if they were working in the international office. So that was the Friday, and then on the Monday, we needed 7,000 employees basically to be working from home, to switch completely to home-based workforce, and obviously all of those people couldn't access the devices that they had, so they needed some sort of device to use at home as well. So we pretty much went into full BCP mode, and we wanted to have, excuse me, a look at what technology we had that could support remote working. So we had those remote access gateways that I talked of earlier, are capable of supporting around 500 users. They were constrained by you know, internet bandwidth, licenses, and the capacity of the terminating hardware. You know, we already knew that these weren't going to be quick or easy things to fix. We had a Citrix environment, virtual desktops. This was mainly used by international agents. That could support around 1,400 users. Obviously, that's way fewer than we needed. We did have the option of using VDA, which was, you know, basically deploying the, you know, a Citrix agent out onto desktops. You know, obviously we had a large number of desktops that weren't being used, but we already kind of knew that wasn't really robust enough to scale. You know, we'd used it for people who maybe had sort of custom desktops that, you know, the sort of standard VDI images didn't really suit. But it was fairly unreliable, certainly for us, and it generally needed a fair amount of intervention from support staff. So if we try to scale that to thousands of users, we knew that support was going to be fairly busy. Finally, I guess, of most interest tonight, from the cloud program, so the stuff that my team have been doing, we had access to unlimited resources in Azure. We hadn't previously used the cloud for any remote access solutions, but we had plenty of network, firewall, IaaS code from my team. I put unlimited in quotes there because things did get a little bit hairy around April, May time in Azure, but we don't talk about that anymore. And finally, as part of our cloud infrastructure, we had a couple of fairly fat pipes from Azure to our data centers, so we knew that they were probably going to come in quite handy. So off we go. I will say at this point, we sort of went into a hedging mode, really. We split up into a number of teams and looked at a number of options, and then see which ones of them would work best, and then we could scale up those. There were loads of unknowns about what would work when we scaled to thousands of remote workers. We, like lots of organizations, have a few legacy applications, including voice, and a workforce who worked day in, day out with just the technology that they use, and who can on occasion be a little bit untech savvy, shall we say. So we wanted to make sure that we could scale to the required number of users quickly as possible, de-risk some of the stuff around the on-premise infrastructure, so the things I talked about that would take a long time to scale up. We knew there'd be a scramble for hardware, so we split into a number of delivery teams working on these multiple solutions. We affectionately, imaginatively called them Stream 1 and Stream 2. Stream 1 was responsible for scaling the existing remote access solutions as quickly as possible, and then Stream 2 focused on using the cloud to scale numbers quickly. So the scope of these work streams ranged from going out and buying as many laptops as we could lay our hands on, compute nodes for Citrix, licenses to scale up, the VPN and the Citrix options, and then activities that would deliver Azure-based NetScaler gateways to get into our on-premise Citrix estate across the express route circuits we had in place, rather than over our internet links, which were already struggling by that point. So the cloud stuff was all Stream 2. 2A was Azure Windows Virtual Desktop, and 2C was getting access to Citrix via NetScaler gateways. I've even forgotten what 2B was now, but it was obviously so terrible that we abandoned it quickly enough not even to remember what it was. Okay, so just before we go into the Windows Virtual Desktop stuff, I just wanted to sort of cover off a bit about those solutions, so that we could, to get as many people connected as possible. This diagram clearly isn't anatomically correct, but it shows how we deployed services into additional spokes connected to our hubs. So at the top here, we built Citrix NetScaler gateways that would serve as an ICA proxy. So first, brokering the connection, and then sending proxying the connection to the VDI VMs. Agents could connect to the URL, log in through Azure AD, multi-factor with Microsoft Authenticator, and then just get through to a familiar desktop. The ICA stuff actually did work really well. The protocol optimization meant it was a really good option for voice agents. We did find that users in Delhi didn't have a great experience. They were obviously coming quite a long way over the internet, to hit the gateways. So we ended up building some additional gateways in central India, connected those over express route, and then used Microsoft Network to sort of backhaul. And that way we had sort of, lower latency and, lower jitter, so a more predictable connection. At the bottom, we had some additional VPN gateway. So we use the same NVAs in Azure that we do on-prem. So we could quickly spin up a VPN gateway and get some back office users and those sorts of things coming over that way. And then in the middle here, obviously all the compute resource for Windows Virtual Desktop that we'll come on to in a minute. Come on to now, in fact. So Windows Virtual Desktop, what is it? So basically it's a Microsoft service consisting of platform services to broker a connection to pools of IaaS compute resource. Desktops or applications where the customer can then run a range of either out of the box or custom images. So the blurb on the Microsoft website says that you can set up multi-session Windows 10 deployments that deliver fully scalable Windows 10 environments. You can virtualize Microsoft 365 apps. You can provide Windows 7 virtual desktops, which I think is, is quite an interesting selling point. Certainly I've heard that a number of times because of the extended support there, security updates. You can bring existing RDS and Windows Server desktop and apps, so sort of a migration option. You can virtualize desktops and applications, and you can use a sort of unified management experience for Windows 10, Windows Server, Windows 7. So on the right of this graphic, which I lifted from the Microsoft website, we've got all the platform elements. So these are the bits that are managed by Microsoft. So this is sort of WVD service here. It's got all the sort of broker, gateway, load balancing stuff in there. The infrastructure stuff that obviously everyone's familiar with around networking and storage. And then on the left-hand side, you've got the sort of customer managed stuff. So, the IaaS images, identity access management, network policies, those types of things. Rich, I don't know whether you just want to give a bit more detail into the WVD architecture at this point.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Hi, everybody. So this is just a representative architecture, quite high level. One of the things, for those of you who come from a remote desktop services background, one of the key things you're going to notice from this diagram is, we have none of that supporting infrastructure such as the connection brokers, the secure gateways, and the web services, no SQL database, all those supporting elements, that you use to go with your your servers or your desktops. They've all been removed, and that's all taken care of now as part of the remote the Windows Virtual Desktop service that Microsoft offer. A couple of things to point out as well, in terms of the connectivity into the virtual machines. There's no incoming connection. You don't have to open any incoming firewall ports. It's all outward connections. So the WVD agent, it will listen for connections and it will connect out when when it's signaled. So that's quite nice from a security standpoint. And then, of course, we've got, this is all backed by Azure Active Directory, so we can leverage conditional access policy, and, apply multi-factor authentication just so we've got, security in depth, because, presenting this service to the outside world, poses some risk. And then, we've got from a profile standpoint, we leverage, an Azure Files storage account, which is accessible then from each of the the Windows Virtual Desktop machines, and all user profiles are captured or encapsulated with the FS Logix technology. That all takes place, within Azure, and yes, fortunately we had express route circuits in place, before this kind of happened. So our connectivity up to our on-premise data center, that was already there via the hub and spoke patterns that we designed. So that was quite easy to kind of get going. So we'd be able to leverage the Active Directory and provide users with access to all our on-premise resources, where most of our line of business applications and file data live. So that all worked quite well.
Great, cheers, Rich. Just on the next slide, I wanted to talk about our approach to delivering Windows Virtual Desktop. So first of all, we sort of split that into three main elements. Configuring the platform. This was no mean feat when we started, really. Prior to the spring release, WVD was a sort of collection of PowerShell scripts. There's no ARM, no portal management. Made it quite difficult to build and configure, and tricky for our identity and access management team to administer as well. Thankfully, that situation has improved a lot since the spring release, and Rich will go through some of that in the demo. Image management, we knew from the off that image management was going to be really important. The first image we built through our existing endpoint management tool, but it wasn't really suitable. There was poor version control, and was really more suited just to delivering applications to desktops on-prem. We weren't 100% sure which community of users would end up on the platform, and I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. So we wanted to make sure that images could be quickly updated and pushed out for use. So at this point, we enlisted help of our friends at DevOps Group. They were already in the office, actually working on another project, and they could just quickly turn their hand to this activity. So they developed a pipeline based on Azure DevOps, Packer, PowerShell, Pester, to take a marketplace Windows 10 image, add Admiral custom applications, and deliver a tested image for use in WVD. At first, we deployed single user VMs, but later we deployed pools of multi-session VMs, which were easier to scale and more cost effective. And now we've got a sort of blend of both of those. And then finally, the networking and connectivity. We needed to build all the networking to deploy the virtual machines into, and connect them to services running on-prem. And this included all of the associated firewall rules from the cloud to services, as Rich mentioned, that most of them were still running in our data centers. So there was a fair amount of work there to do to get those applications working. So that's enough talk. Rich is now going to go through, hopefully, and give us a demo of how things look.
Okay, let's give it a go.
Guys, did you want me to stop the recording for this part?
Oh, yes, please. Yeah, well reminded.
No problem. Bear with.
Thanks, John.
I know we've had significant number of questions in the chat. I don't know. It looks like, Paul, you've been managing to keep up with that. So I don't think there's anything outstanding. If there's any outstanding questions, guys, feel free to get them into the chat, and we can obviously pass them on directly to Paul and Richard if we need that answered. And the other thing I was quickly going to mention, but before we finally say thank you to the guys, if you can see my screen, there is any other questions. There is a WVD community. There's a website there. If you click along to that URL, you'll see that there's some fantastic resources out in the community that can help you with the WVD implementation. Just as equally, there's a number of websites there. So browse the WDD community. They're a specialized user group and community there that focus specifically on WVD. And on that note, let's all come off mute. Give the guys a round of applause. That was a fantastic talk. Thank you very much, guys. Cool. Okie dokie. So next line, I think we're all good for a break. I think we'll just motor on through. We're doing good for time. It's 7:30. I'm going to hand you over now to Dave Phelps and Matt Fortunka from Microsoft to talk Logic Apps. Are you there, guys?
Indeed, we are. You there, Matt?
I'm here. Ready to go.
Floor is yours.
Fantastic, thanks. Right, I'm just going to share my screen. Screen 2. I'm just going to present. So yeah, what we're going to talk about. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah. So we could talk about some updates that have happened recently for Azure Logic Apps. I'm also going to touch on a few updates from functions as well, which is something that Matt is going to talk about afterwards, and then we can take some questions. So conscious that not everybody on the call will be necessarily familiar with Logic Apps, so just going to spend 5 minutes or so just doing a bit of a level set, just talking about the kind of scenarios that Logic Apps cover, and kind of what Logic Apps are, what they look like, and the kind of problems they can solve. So these are the typical integration scenarios that customers are facing today. And within Microsoft, we see all of these across our customers, and this landscape actually looks so different to when you think even just a few years ago, but not even 5 or 10 years ago, when customers were buying products, they were installing them on-prem, they were going and buying integration platforms, installing them on premises to integrate these things together, because they were just never meant to be integrated and to be talking to other applications. So things like IoT, SaaS, organizations these days, they're using more and more SaaS applications, so they need ways of being able to connect to those SaaS platforms quickly and easily. People and processes, things like the Power Platform, enabling employees to be able to go and build applications that they can use and they can share within their organization. Of course, they need access to data. They need access to that data in a secure and managed way. And then we've got B2B and application to application. So most organizations these days have got a landscape that spans the cloud, maybe multiple clouds, and back to on premises. So being able to kind of span that bridge and integrate with cloud applications and cloud services, but also making use of systems and services that are on-prem. So in order to facilitate that kind of integration landscape, you need a number of things. So we need APIs. We need a way of being able to create and manage APIs that make them easy to consume, both internally and externally. We need workflow to be able to orchestrate those APIs. We need messaging. We need to be able to pass messages between systems in a reliable way. It might be that we're using a queue, for example, if a system is sending messages faster than another system is able to consume them, for example. And finally, events, being able to react to events that are often business events. When something occurs, we need to take action and run some kind of business process. And on the Azure platform, we have what we call Azure Integration Services, which is really 4 things. It's API management for the creation of the APIs I was just talking about, Logic Apps for building workflows to orchestrate systems and APIs. And then we've got Service Bus for messaging, queues, topics, reliable messaging. And finally, Event Grid for event notifications. And underpinning all of this is Azure Resource Manager to deploy all of these things, Azure Monitor, and Azure AD to be able to apply RBAC across these different services, and to use identity as a way of controlling access at runtime. But today we're focused on logic apps. So what are logic apps? So here's a picture of a logic app. It's a visual workflow designer that enables you to orchestrate between different systems, APIs, etc. We've got a whole bunch of connectors behind this, which I'll show you in a second. But essentially, this designer allows you to create actions that go and perform some kind of process. Like in this case, I'm calling off to a number of different APIs to go and orchestrate a business process. As this logic app executes its persisting state, it's doing this for reliability purposes. So if this happened to be a long-running process that could last days, weeks, or even months, then you don't want that process to fail if there's some kind of hardware failure that's happened. So by persisting state, we can continue with that execution. And these are some of the kind of typical scenarios that you can achieve with logic apps. So I've talked about orchestration, but publish and subscribe, being able to publish messages onto Azure Service Bus and then react to those messages, react to those events. Like I said, those are often business events, like an order being received, for example, or a policy due for renewal, being able to then just plug in subscribers to those events without having to impact the system that might be producing the event in the first place. Different mediation patterns, so request response, being able to just accept a request, maybe drop the message onto a queue, and then continue processing afterwards, a very common pattern, and being able to have conditional execution, batching, debatching, XML, JSON transformation between the two, etc., etc. So I talked about connectors. We have around 400 at the moment, different connectors. This slide is continually out of date, so I've stopped updating the pictures, but yeah, there's loads and loads of connectors connecting to all kinds of different SaaS providers, and also services that are in Azure and other clouds. So that's Logic Apps V1, that's Logic Apps as it stands today. And just as a quick recap of some of the things that the customers love about Logic Apps, we've got loads and loads of customers using Logic Apps today. It's a very popular service, and customers love Logic Apps because it is so easy to build things. You can go and build integrations really quickly. You can make use of different services in Azure, like storage, cognitive services, or just all of those services that are available to you. Often there's a connector in Logic Apps enabling you to go and use that service. But looking at the sister product to Azure Logic Apps, which is functions, and customers love functions too, because you can just develop code and deploy that code into Azure without having to worry about how you're going to provision any service. For example, you can just scale, and you're really focused on the problem that you're trying to solve. But functions have a number of quite nice features, such as flexible hosting and networking, so containerization, being able to attach to a virtual network, for example, deployment slots, and local development and debugging. And these are all features that our customers tell us that they love about functions. So what we announced in September, I think it was, is Logic Apps running on the functions runtime. So what does that mean? So to begin with, we've got a brand new designer. Now, this designer is making much better use of the real estate on the screen. I've been using it myself for around a month or so, and I really love it. It's a really nice UI that enables you to kind of build integrations and workflows that are more complex than they were before. You could build them before, but because of the amount of space that the actions were taking up on the screen, it became a bit more tricky to actually sometimes to visualize your flow. Whereas the new designer really does a good job there. And this is within Visual Studio Code. So we've got a new plugin for Visual Studio Code that enables you to go and create your Logic app locally. Doesn't need to be cloud connected. Run your Logic app locally, test it, and then just deploy it into the cloud to run. I'll show you what this looks like in a few minutes. The other thing we've introduced is stateless Logic apps. So I touched on this before, that when a Logic app is executing, we're persisting state. So this Logic app here that's got a bunch of actions, each time an action is executing, we're persisting state. And that makes sense, like I said earlier, for lots of scenarios where it's something that could be long running, where you really want the Logic app to be retrying, for example, if another system isn't available. But in scenarios where, for example, request response, maybe off a button click on a website, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to be persisting state. Because if you go into some kind of retry loop, then the user will be long gone, they would have clicked the button again. So there are lots of scenarios where that state is just adding latency that the scenario doesn't really warrant. And so that's what we've done. We've added the ability to say, I don't want any state. So the Logic app would just run through the actions and not persist anything, offering a big performance improvement. Networking is security. So with the Logic apps today, there are two hosting models. We have the consumption tier and a dedicated ISE tier. Consumption pay as you go, ISE pay per month. And there's quite a difference in the two cost models. But with running on the Azure Functions runtime, we can now, by using premium functions, we can have a private IP address for our Logic apps. We can attach to a virtual network, and we can, the private IP is through private link. But we can attach to a virtual network and we can access all of those private resources that you may have in Azure, or maybe you're using ExpressRoute or a site-to-site VPN connecting back to your on-premises resources. So now the Logic app will be able to natively connect to a number of those different services. And OAuth as well. So one thing that Functions does have is a very nice, called EasyAuth, but a very nice AD, and also other identity providers as well, but a really nice OAuth experience. And so that will now come to Logic apps. And monitoring. So Logic apps today supports log analytics, but by moving on to the Functions runtime, we now get application insight support, which of course is what Functions use. Azure API management supports App Insights as well, and so we'll get this very nice, which I will actually touch on later and give you a quick demo of what this looks like, but also seamless correlation, which is something that App Insights is very good at, right from, for example, a website right through to a backend, or touching all those different services and getting a nice end-to-end view. And as I mentioned earlier as well, being able to take your Logic app, containerize it, and run it wherever you want. Very, very powerful. So you could now take your Logic app and you could run it on-prem, or you could even run it in a different cloud. Very, very powerful, and a feature that lots of customers have been asking for. So I'm just going to run through a few demos. I'm just going to go into VS Code and show you what Logic apps looks like, run inside VS Code. I'm then going to create a Logic app from scratch, and I'm going to connect to a couple of different services. I'm going to talk to a SQL database. Now that SQL database is Azure SQL, but I've deployed it with a private IP address. So that's completely private, no public access. The same with, I've got an Azure function that's deployed, and my Logic app is also going to talk to that function. And again, completely private. And I'm going to do this in parallel, so execute both of those things at the same time. And then I haven't written it here, but I'm then going to just publish a message onto Service Bus and kick off another process. And then I'll just show you stateless Logic apps and application insights. So I'm going to get going pretty quickly because I'm conscious of time. So as you can see here in VS Code, there's a new extension I've installed called Logic Apps Preview. And so what I can do is I can go ahead and create a new project here, and I will call this. In fact, I think I created a folder earlier. Did I? No, let's create another one. In fact, folder. We'll call it Azure user group. Okay. So I get a choice here of saying I can create a stateful workflow or a stateless workflow. So I'm going to go and create a stateful workflow, and I'm going to call it Azure demo. So what this does, that's gone and created a project, and I've now got a workflow here that's been created for me. Now, if I right click, I can say open in Designer. It takes a few seconds to load for the first time because I'm using Storage Emulator. So I get a choice here of I can use the connectors that are built into Azure as well. So some of the connectors run inside the functions runtime, and these will be able to access resources that are on the virtual network, for example, because they're running within the functions runtime. Whereas some of the connectors will run out in the Azure cloud. And for things like Dynamics, for example, that makes perfect sense because you're going off to some SaaS service, so it makes sense for that to be cloud hosted. So I'm just going to say that I am going to use the cloud connectors, and this is the designer. So the first thing I get is an option to create a trigger, something that's going to activate my logic app. And actually, if I just click here, we can see all of the connectors that we've got available to us here. So it's absolutely hundreds of them. But what I'm going to do is just create an HTTP request trigger. So this will be triggered by an HTTP post. And what I can do here is I can define a schema, a JSON schema for my request. So I'm just going to click on enter a sample. So I can put a JSON payload in here, and it will automatically generate a schema definition for me. So if I just go and add, I've got one I prepared earlier, just so that I don't make any mistakes. So there we go. So I've pasted in my payload, and I've now got a schema definition that's been generated. What I'm now going to do is make a call out to SQL. And remember, I said this is a private SQL. So if I just go and search for SQL, this is an early version of the connector. But if I just do SQL on as the SQL connection name, I enter a SQL connection string to my database, create. So this has now created the action. I can now go ahead and just enter a SQL query in here. As I said, support for things like stored procedures, which are there in the current connector. Expect to be there in the future. So I can do select star from customer or customer ID equals like, and you see the designer is now offering up the schema values that I defined on my request. So I can just go and say customer ID here. I can just go and rename this as well, and I will call this get customer details. Just go and save that. And then what I want to do in parallel is I want to go and call into my function. So I'm just going to use the HTTP connector. I'm going to do an HTTP post. And this is the URL of my function. And remember, this is a private function as well. I need to add a header or content type, which is application/JSON. And then I just need to go and add a body. So if I just go and add a body here, and I'm going to pass in customer ID, And I'm going to pass in the customer ID. So you can see down here, I just go and click on customer ID, and it adds that value in there for me automatically. Just save that as well. Oh, enter a valid JSON. I've made a mistake there. Oh, it's a semicolon, not a colon. Thank you. So if I just close that. Okay, and I will just rename this and make it a bit more meaningful. So let's call this get banking details. So this could be that I'm receiving an order and I need to go and call into my SQL database to do something. I need to go and call into another service. And then what I'm going to do finally is I'm going to go and publish a message onto Service Bus. So if I just go and select Service Bus here, and I say send a message, and I'll call my Service Bus connection SBCon, excuse me. And if I just go and paste in my Service Bus connection string. So now what it's asking for is the name of a queue or a topic. So I've got a topic that I created against an instance of Service Bus that I'm using in this demo. So what this is hopefully going to do is publish the message onto my topic. And then I've got another logic app that I created just a couple of hours ago. And what that will do is that's subscribing to this order received event. And that's just going to kick off and send an email to me. And of course, the power here is if this were a real order process, that if I wanted some other process to then react to this event, this order received event, I could just go and add another subscriber to that topic. And I'm not affecting this process at all. And I'm not affecting the process that's sending the order confirmation email either. Right, so let's just go back here. So I've got the topic. What I now need to do is just add the content and the content type. So my content type is application/JSON. And my content, I'm just going to go and paste in the payload that I've got from when I did this earlier. And there's the content that I'm going to post onto Service Bus. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the body from the request. That's the product details that's coming into my process. I'm then going to aggregate the customer details that came back from SQL. And finally, I'm then going to aggregate the banking details that came back from my call to my function. So if I just save this, hopefully that works. So if I just click run, what this is going to do is load the functions runtime locally within VS Code. And it's going to give me a local URL. And hopefully, if the demo gods are with me, it'll work. And it will call out to SQL, it will call out to my function, it will drop a message onto Service Bus, and I'm going to get an email in my inbox. So we just give this a second to load. And if I just go and right click on my workflow here, we can see that I've got my local URL. And if I just go and copy that local URL, and I go into Postman, and I just paste that URL in there, and I press send. Fingers crossed, I've got a 202 accepted. And if I refresh this, we can see that my logic app succeeded. If I show the run, we can see that the request was received, and you can go and see the payload that came in here. So it's rendered these as fields in the designer because I defined a schema for it. With my customer details, we can see here as well that we've got my payload coming back with my customer details, and then my banking details. You can see here I've got a payload coming back, and finally the message that goes to goes to service bus, you can see the content there as well. So did it actually work is the question. And if I just grab my email over here, we can see that we did actually receive an email. So what's interesting is that if I just go and show you the other logic app that I created, so this is the order received logic app, and all this is doing is just subscribing to an event in service bus, and what it's doing is just sending this email confirmation. But as I said, being able to plug in additional subscribers here is incredibly easy, and that's the power of service bus, and it's also the power of logic apps because it has this native integration with service bus out of the box. So I deployed this earlier into Azure. I'm not doing it now just because it takes a little bit longer and conscious of time. So I deployed this earlier, and if I just jump to my remote, there we go. So that's worked okay, and I should get emails for these. So what I'm going to do is just jump into my browser and just show you this logic app. So this is a new resource type in Azure. If I click on workflows, then we can see my two logic apps that I've deployed. And if we just scroll down to networking, we can see that I've actually configured a private endpoint for this logic app, so it's got a private IP address. I've also configured a virtual network against this logic app. And if I just jump back here and I copy this, and if I just go here, in fact, you can see that I was doing this earlier, but if I just go and ping that, you'll see that this logic app has got a private IP deployed into Azure. So I mentioned about the application insights. So I'm just going to show you that quickly as well. So if we just scroll, in fact, I've got it on a application insights. There we go. So App Insights has got some really cool features. One of my favorites is this application map. So you can click on application map, and it will show you the different services that have joined up through correlation. So it's working out the dependencies between your applications. So I've got my logic app, which is called into service bus, and it's also called into SQL. Haven't really wired this up yet, the function, but that will come soon. But yeah, you get this kind of very nice visual view, and as you add more and more services, then of course you get those added to this view. So it's a really nice way of, with a disparate integration, being able to just see the process flow and all of the different dependencies that you have. So what I can also do is just jump into the logs. And here's one I created earlier. So if I just go into my Query Explorer and I just go and pull these down. So my order process, if I just go and execute this, we can see now that that we've got all of these entries that are in application insights. This is for the process that was actually submitting the order. I also have the order received as well. So this is the other side of service bus, and I can completely join these up with correlation. So I can go and build an end-to-end view. I can build a dashboard. So it's really, really nice given this end-to-end correlation that you get with application insights. And just taking a quick look at the dependencies here, we can see that we've got service bus and we've got SQL that have been logged as dependencies. I really like this. It gives you so much flexibility to be able to write queries that span across a whole kind of application or an integration that's touching multiple different services. So that's application insights. So I'm just going to show you very quickly what the new designer looks like compared to the old designer. So, oops, didn't mean to do that. So if we click on the designer, so this is the new designer that I've got here. And as you can see, it's very nice. It's got a switch statement here where I can kind of put lots of different actions across here. But if I click down here, I can switch to the old canvas, and immediately you can see that the amount of space that it's taking up on the screen is just so much more than with the new designer. I just love it. I think it's so good. So that's the new designer. Showed VS Code. The next thing I'm going to show quickly is stateless logic apps. So I've got one here that I created. And this logic app is it's the current consumption tier of logic apps. So I just run this logic app. It's taken around a second to run. And if I now switch to a stateless logic app, it's taking a while to run for the first time. And the demo gods are not with me. 15. Oh, there we go. So it's coming back in about 100 milliseconds. Thought for a minute that wasn't going to work then. So as you can see, it's kind of around, I don't know, 10, 15 times faster because it's not recording any of that state. And it's actually this logic app here that I'm executing for this particular test. So stateless logic apps are really, really powerful, and it gives you that ability to just have, for those very low latency scenarios. Right, I'm just going to jump back to the slides just to make sure that I did everything that I said I would. And I think I have, so I'm just going to present my deck again. So just as a summary, before I hand over to Matt to go and talk about functions, what is logic apps on the runtime, on the functions runtime giving us? Well, a whole bunch of improvements. So runtime flexibility, being able to containerize your logic app, being able to run it inside the functions runtime, so premium functions, and also Kubernetes, for example, on-prem or even a different cloud. This brand new designer giving really nice, a really nice view of your workflow. A development experience that's including Visual Studio Code. You can still do this in the cloud, by the way, sorry, in the portal, by the way. You can still go and do it in the browser. But this ability to be able to go run your logic app locally is really, really nice and a great experience. Improved execution times. So yeah, those stateless logic apps I was just talking about. And also being able to attach to a virtual network and have private IP addresses. And for financial customers, this is really key. It's a really key point. Just being able to say my logic app is completely private, it's not publicly addressable, and it can also securely access all of my on-prem secure resources, or resources that are hosted in the cloud privately. So if you want to know more, the public preview is available today. Anyone can go and use it. You can download the plugin for Visual Studio Code and get started with that. And a couple of links here as well for more details. And with that, I'll hand over to Matt, and then I think we should have some time at the end for questions. So over to you, Matt.
Thank you very much. Everyone see my screen? Let me just get myself ready.
All good, Matt.
I appreciate I am the only thing standing between you and the possibility of winning a prize in the quiz, so I'm going to make this fairly quick. So for those that don't know, Functions are our serverless platform. We support a wide variety of programming languages, and there's a couple of different hosting options there. Back in Ignite in September, October time, we announced some changes to some of the hosting plans for app service, which is the kind of technology that underpins functions. If you're using ASE right now, the app service environment for kind of network isolation, there's a new version of that coming along, which simplifies a lot of the networking. But there were two features, I think, particularly that caught my attention during some of these announcements. And the first is around this idea of creating functions. So you've been able to create new functions in VS Code and in Visual Studio for a while now. And when you create them, you get prompted for which language you want to choose, what trigger you want to use to start with. But actually, if you've got a predefined API that you want to convert over to a function, it would be useful to be able to use something like the Swagger or OpenAPI definition. So I'm going to take an OpenAPI file here, and the purpose of this is ultimately it's going to go and get some results from Azure DevOps. And I've got a single operation on there, DevOps test. It's going to be a post request, and as part of its body, it's going to take an object, and I've defined that in a schema. And it's going to take a string with a GUID on there, and it's going to take an integer on there, so I can limit the number of results that come back from my query. So going back to that extension that Dave was showing off earlier, I'm going to click on a different one now and go and say, let's go create new project. I'm going to select that folder. I'm going to select C#. And then as soon as the templates load, I've got this brand new option now to create HTTP triggers from OpenAPI v2, v3 specification. This is currently in preview. I'm going to give that a name, unique.functions. And then we're going to select our OpenAPI file. And this is now going to go off and build our local project. As it builds it, we'll give it a second to just build it all up. Assuming the demo gods are smiling on me tonight. Come on, there we go. Right, so what that's created for me is my outline of my function. So here's my function now. It's my DevOps test function. And it's accepting, if we wrap that a little bit, as its body, this object that's been created called DevOps query item. And it's built that model for me based on that OpenAPI definition. Okay. Now, this is a function, so if I let's just do a quick build on that, just get rid of some of my glowy lines. Not that build. This is a function, which means that thanks to the new stuff that Dave was showing off with Logic Apps, I can now go into my Logic App and go, well, let's just create a workflow in this project. Let that build. Yeah, that's fine. And I'm just going to create something, a stateless workflow called get DevOps, like that, just as Dave did. And then I'm going to go onto here and I'm going to go open in Designer. And hopefully that should just load, given its little bit of lag. There we go. I want to use the connectors from Azure. And these connectors are interesting because when you run a Logic app, you can think of these as kind of little self-contained wrapped APIs that are sitting running in Azure. So I've got some already provisioned up there. And I'm going to do exactly like Dave did. I'm going to say, well, let's go when a HTTP request is received. And then I'm going to go, I want to use an Azure connector this time for DevOps. And I'm going to use one of the built-in connectors for Azure DevOps to get the results of a query that I have there. And then we'll return a response. And in my query, I'm going to select my organization name, but because I've already authenticated with this connector, it knows about all my stuff. So I'm going to say I want that one. And then what we got there, I pick that one randomly. And then we'll pick one of my queries, backlog items by sprint. There we go. That. I only want the top 10 items, otherwise create problems. And then on my response, I'm going to go back, and in my body, I'm just going to return the body of that result. Just nice and simple. I'm going to save that, and we're going to run. Now, if I now run that, we should now get a URL for my logic app hosted in my function. Now, the thing that's worth pointing out here is this Azure DevOps step. Let's just let that run, and then we can test it quickly just to make sure it's all working. Don't need that one, don't need that one, don't need that one. Come on, wiki wiki. Okay. So as soon as that's up and running, I'll get my URL, and then we can test that straight away. Now, if you think what I've had to do with this Azure DevOps connector, I've literally just dragged that on. There was a setup step to wire up the connector the first time to use my credentials to do that, and then it just works. I go and grab that URL just quickly from there. You can then open up this thing here and then test it in place. And what you'll see is that will now go off, go and grab my data, and eventually I will get a response back with all of my work items from my Azure DevOps board. Now, if you've ever tried to do that inside a function, it's a bit of a pain. In fact, let's go and have a look at the docs quickly. So there we go. So there's the, oh, look at this choice. Oh, so which one of those? Oh, we'll just choose one of these. Okay, that's great. Oh no, that's not very helpful. Where's all the documentation? Let's go and find that one. And ultimately, you get to this long-winded discussion about how I authenticate with Azure DevOps. Oh yeah, we'll use the Active Directory authentication library. Oh look, there's a sample there. Let's go and see the sample. Is the sample in there? No. Oh, let's go and find the actual source code. And the code that you need to be able to access that Azure DevOps resource. So there's the line that does the let's go and get my projects, and there's all the code for getting all your authentication piece. And that's mad. So we recognize this, and we've actually added the ability to use those logic app connectors within your function, within your code. And this is in private preview at the moment, but will be coming out reasonably soon into public preview. I'm going to import in one of those packages as a connector. Let's bring that one in. I'm going to add some using statements in. And then I'm going to add some code. For that. There we go. Okay. So we've added that connector, and then that is my code now for getting my query results. And you notice it takes a couple of these parameters. So we're going to go and get my org as before, my project name, and then I need this connection string. And the connection string is not a connection string to the Azure DevOps itself. It's a connection string to the connector that talks to Azure DevOps. And that new extension has this thing called API connections in now. And I can go and say, well, let's generate me a connection string for this connector. And I've got the choice to either do it via a key, as in standard SQL username, password style authentication, or I can use managed identity. And when I use managed identity, it takes the credentials of the place where the code is running from. In this case, it'll be my credentials, and uses that to authenticate with the connector. So if I now select that, it'll generate me a connection string, and we can run that. Let's just shrink that down a bit. And then all I'm doing once I've got my response is I'm just truncating some of the data and then returning that into an object. So if we now run that, as soon as that's there, I should be able to make this call, which is a post request to my local machine. I'm passing in my ID, which is the query that I want to run, and the number of items I want to return. And then as soon as that is there, come on, wakey, wakey, there we go. That should be there. I can do that send request. And I can now call that code, which means that I'm now using Logic App connectors with inside code, but connecting to them securely using a managed identity. So I hope that's been useful for tonight. It was a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the additional features of functions and things that they've covered in Logic Apps. We're happy to take some questions now. If you'd like to come off mute, Dave. If there's no questions, we're happy to start the quiz early.
That's great, Matt. Dave, I think Dave's been doing a grand job defending them off for you, Matt, in the chat. But, brilliant. No, that's fantastic. Thank you to Dave and Matt for that great talk on Logic Apps. If everybody wants to give them a round of applause, come off mute, share your camera, wave your hat. So, on to the quiz. George, are you there? As he frantically finds the mute button. George? He's still there. Oh, he's gone offline. What a time to go offline, eh? Right, we'll give George a minute or two to see if he can find his way back into the realms of Teams.
I'm still online, but the mute button, oh my god.
Oh,
can you hear me all?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear, George. You want to share your screen and we can kick off the quiz. So I guess while you're sharing that, George, if everybody's got the Kahoot app installed on their mobile devices, then fire it up now. And then we'll hand over to George to take you through the quiz.
Right, I hope you can all see that.
That's looking good.
Right.
So what we're going to do then, guys, I think, are we going to go for first prize on the quiz and a random prize for feedback?
I think that's better. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, we'll do that. So don't all go running off for this after this quiz. I'll flash up another slide with a QR code and a URL. If you could just hang fire for literally 2 minutes after the quiz, we will really appreciate the feedback. So anything you've got to say, that'd be great. So I'm going to hand you over to George now. I'm going to take you through the quiz. Over to you, George. Thanks, mate.
Right. Thanks, John. Right, welcome everyone. The quiz is mainly on the topics of discussion today, that is Logic Apps and WVD. So you can either use it on your app or on the screen. Now there's a few things. If you're using your phone, the answers will be on color code. So red is A, B is blue, and I think orange or yellow, depending on your site, is C, and then D is green. Now for the true and false question, true will be blue and false red. Okay, let's fire on. Is that everyone? Okay, start.
Oh, were you starting? Yeah, I'm going to say anybody struggling, but
sorry.
Doesn't matter. We're off now.
Right, what's the Azure Logic apps logo? That should be. Okay, that's good. Question 2, what's the key capability of Logic app? A, scheduling, B, automate, C, orchestrate tasks, business processes and workflows, and D, all of these. Good, good, good. Oh, there's some good scoreboards there. Can Logic app send an email notification with Office 365 when events happen in various systems, apps and services? A, yes. B, no. C, no, this feature is on the roadmap. And D, yes, but these are complex to configure. Good one. Oh, Ross, it's ready. For which of these is not part of Microsoft integration services? A, Logic Apps, B, Service Bus, C, Event Grid, and D, Data Factory. Good one. Nice answers there. 5, is Logic App a PaaS service? A, yes. No, it is IaaS. C, no, it is a SaaS. Wow. Right. Question 6, does Logic Apps offer out-of-the-box templates? A, no. C, yes. And sorry, B, yes. And C, it's on the roadmap. Colin B. 7, which of these is not supported by built-in connectors in Logic Apps? A, AWS Redshift, B, Trello, C, Dropbox, D, GCP Firestore. Oh, we got a new leader. Which of the following are valid Logic App triggers? A, timer, B, HTTP, C, batch, D, all of the above. Wow. What can you use with the Logic App for event monitoring, routing, and publishing? A, Azure Service Bus, B, Azure Event Grid, and C, Azure API Management. Okay. True or false? Azure virtual machines you create for Windows Virtual Desktop must be Azure AD joined. To begin using the Windows Virtual Desktop with Azure Resource Manager integration, first you will need to A, create a tenant in Windows Virtual Desktop, B, create a host pool via Azure Portal, and C, none of the above. Which virtual machine OS images is not supported by Windows Virtual Desktop? A, Windows 7 Enterprise, B, Windows Server 2016, C, Windows 10 Enterprise N, and D, Windows Server 2019. Four different answers. Which is not a benefit of paired regions? A, region recovery order, B, non-sequential updates, C, platform provided replication, and D, physical isolation. True or false? Data center configurations that provide VM redundancy and availability are called availability sets. True or false? Okay. Have 1,000 marks. True or false again? Fault domains define the group of virtual machines that share a common power source and network switch. True or false? Okay. And the last one, what is a unique physical location within a region? A, availability zone, B, update domain, and C, fault domain.
That was pretty close at the top then, George.
Oh, yes.
Have we got a new winner, or have...
Let's see how it goes. Drum rolls.
Come on, drum roll sound effects. Third place, Adam Ox.
Adam Ox, third place.
It's Colin B.
B.
Oh. First place goes to
Alan. Always looked that way.
Awesome. Good work. Well done, Alan. If you want to reach out, drop your email in the chat window, Alan, and we'll make sure we get that £50 voucher for Amazon wing its way over to you. But all is not lost. Stay where you are for a second. We've got one more prize to give away, which we'll do obviously probably tomorrow morning once we've received some of the feedback. If I quickly share my screen, I'll send you the URL. There we go, guys. You should see my screen there now. Really appreciate you all attending tonight. If you don't mind just logging on with that QR code or browse to the URL, that would be fantastic. Drop us any feedback that you've got, thoughts, considerations, anything you like. If you want to do a talk, if you've got something you'd like to jump onto our user group and give a presentation, let us know. All feedback is welcome. So on that note, I think it's thank you from all of us here at the Welsh Azure user group. Follow us, share us far and wide on the social platforms, but don't forget to drop that feedback and look out for the announcement of who that second winner of a £50 voucher is tomorrow morning. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, John. Nice one.
Bye.
They're not going to see me.
Cheers, back.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.
Sometimes see me, man.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot.